Hi, welcome to SED 7335 Literature for Adolescents and this short video about censorship. So when we think about censorship, there's a long history to the censorship of children's and young adult books. When we think about this history, we can look to, for example, 1885. Back in 1885, Huckleberry Finn was criticized for being coarse, trash, rough, inelegant, not elevating, and more suited for slums than to intelligent, respectable people. So a lot of people had a lot to say, not necessarily positive about Huckle Finn, and that was more than 100 years ago. 11 years later, in 1896, The Red Badge of Courage, a classic that many of us know and have read, was criticized, and the critics said that it abounds in profanity and should never be given into the hands of boys. This becomes an increasing issue in young adult literature as well as in children's literature as we start to see more and more topics that maybe were once considered taboo that are no longer considered as taboo, and as society evolves, really. We're talking about mainly public school libraries and public school classrooms here. So when we think about censorship, and the kinds of books that are censored or challenged, there are several assumptions that we can draw from those attacks. First, anything is potentially censorable. Nothing is safe. Everything that we read, everything that we purchase for our school libraries, everything that we put in our school classrooms, in our classroom libraries, no matter how much we may love it ourselves, there's always going to be somebody out there who can find something wrong with it. Nothing is safe. Many times the newer work, the more likely it is to be attacked. And a lot of times that just boils down to we fear that which we don't know. So parents, citizens may be more comfortable with books that have been around a long time because they know them. And so when we bring new literature into our libraries or classrooms, it can be feared. Censorship is arbitrary and capricious. You can never predict where censorship is going to occur next. It's always a surprise. What gets censored in one school sometimes slips under the radar at the school down the street. So again, we never know where it's going to happen or what it is that's going to be challenged. A few more assumptions. More often than not, younger teachers tend to be involved in these cases. And that's just simply that people who are challenging books look for teachers or librarians who don't have a lot of experience, because of course they think they're going to be successful challenging someone about a book, and that person has less experience. Many times censorship strikes without warning, and a lot of times it leads to ripples of fear in nearby communities. That doesn't mean nearby communities challenge the same books, but it may mean that they start to wonder about the books that are in their school's libraries and classroom. Censors are usually people outside of the schools and not just the parents. They could be anybody. They could be just a taxpayer in the school district. It could be a grandparent. It could be somebody who doesn't have kids but has heard something negative about a book that's been introduced into the classroom or school libraries. Typically, censors are decent and concerned parents who wish only the best for the young people. So they don't necessarily have nefarious motivations for challenging the book. They really wish the best for the young people. They simply don't understand that the teachers and the librarians want the exact same thing. Teachers and librarians want only the best for the young people in their classrooms and libraries. And so we're trying to give them books that speak to them, books that serve as both mirrors to their own lives and windows into lives that are different from theirs. Most Houston area districts have a censorship policy, and it's something that as a literacy leader you need to be aware of in the school district in which you work. And this is not just true in Houston area districts. This is true in districts around the country. Most school districts have some kind of a censorship policy in place, and you, as a literacy leader, it is your responsibility to know that policy so that when a book is challenged, you can work with the teachers in your school to fight that challenge, or to not necessarily fight it, but to use the policy in the way that it has been written. So school systems and teachers. So like I said, most of them have a censorship policy. That's something that you'll want to research. And if your district doesn't have a policy, work to implement one. But in addition, schools and teachers there's probably a district-wide materials selection policy. And you want to be aware of what that is. Also, you need to make sure that your school or district has a written procedure for dealing with complaints. A lot of times that procedure has common similar steps like this. So the parent needs to talk to the teacher or the librarian who's involved. If not satisfied, the parent or the person complaining needs to fill out a citizen's request for reconsideration of a work form. It may have a different title, but it's basically the form that the person filing the complaint has to fill out, saying that they want a book reconsidered. And then there needs to be a standing committee that has a written timeline and procedures, and it's their job to act on the complaint. So it's not just the one teacher who has a book challenged who deals with it. There should be a committee at the district level who deals with these complaints. In addition, as a teacher, if you're going to require that an entire class read a specific book, you want to make sure that you have a written rationale for any books that are required reading. This is not the same as books that you have available for independent reading in your classroom library, but for any books that are required. So in that rationale, you want to include things like, for what classes is it especially appropriate, and for why? For what reasons is it especially appropriate for those classes? You want to make sure that you include the objectives that the book lends itself to. You want to make sure that in that rationale you explain the ways in which the book will be used to meet those objectives. You want to make sure that you're upfront and you explain any problems of style, tone, or theme, or any other possible grounds out there for censorship that are evident in the book. Go ahead and put it out there on the table. You want to explain how the teacher will deal with those problems. You want to explain in there that, assuming that the objectives are met, how students would be different because of their reading of that book. You want to suggest some other appropriate books that an individual could read as a substitute. And you also want to include what reputable sources have recommended this book. What have the critics said about it? So when you're working on this, you're going to want to work with your librarian and consult things like School Library Journal or Booklist or Kirkus or the Horn Book. Look at some of those reputable sources for reviews of books. In addition, as you're working to prepare rationales like this, consider consulting resources like the National Council of Teachers of English and the American Library Association. Both of those organizations have resources that will help you write rationales, and in some cases, they already have rationales that have been written for some of the books that teachers use in their English classrooms. So those are both really good sources. I want to show you this link here. This is a link to the American Library Association's website. It is the top 100 banned or challenged books from 2000 to 2009. Here's the list right here that link takes you to. Notice number 1 on the series is the Harry Potter series. You'll also notice many other stories that we see often in English classrooms. This is interesting. The Captain Underpants series by Dave Pilkey is number 13. The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. The Color Purple. To Kill a Mockingbird is there. The Giver by Lois Lowry. Beloved by Toni Morrison. Bridge to Terabithia. The Face on the Milk Carton by Carolyn Cooney. So there's a mixture of books that we often use as whole class novels and books that we see a lot of students reading as independent reading. This is a great website to go look at just to get an idea of what kind of books are challenged. Down here, number 94, the Goosebumps series. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, a novel that many of you may have read as an adolescent. Tons of books on this list. ALA, you can see right here. I'll move the window down a little bit. They also sponsor Banned Books Week. It's generally at the end of September, so watch for that. And I would encourage you in the upcoming weeks to choose a banned book from this list and read it, just to get an idea of what could it possibly have provoked in people to cause them to want to challenge the book. There's a lot of ideas and resources as well available for you on this website that you might choose to look at when you have some time. So that's it for today. I hope I've given you some good information you can use when dealing with censorship in your schools. Have a great day.